see you all.
Okay, good to see you. All right, so why don't we get started by doing the opening prayers tonight? So, Zara, would you like to be the Umze tonight and recite the opening prayers?
I absolutely would. You'll have to forgive me. I need to go grab my book really quickly. It's in the other room. Bear
All
with
right,
me
go
one
right
moment.
ahead. Go right ahead. Okay. So, Zoho, what we do is we do opening prayers to set our intention, our motivation to receive practices, to do the teachings, to do whatever it is that we need to do, and then we do that main thing. Like tonight, we're receiving these teachings, and then at the end we do a dedication. So we have a book that we use, and if you're interested, we can make sure that you get this. So
Okay, sure.
Okay. All right, so Zara, so if you'll begin, please, on page 1 and do the altruistic motivation and carry on.
Where do you want me to stop?
Stop with page number 5 will be fine. Page
Okay.
number 6. Page number 6.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. We take refuge in the kind, root, and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind, root, and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind, root, and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all of the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas, I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Dharmas, in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And the Dharma, and the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. And the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the cause of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so tonight we are following our book, Learning Buddhism. And so we make chapters available to everybody who do not have the book because the book is no longer available right now. But we're on chapter 7. We're on the two truths. So last time we talked about chapter 6, which was love, compassion, and bodhicitta. So does anybody have any questions about anything that we've done before, either last chapter or the chapters before that? Any other questions or about the life of the Buddha that we talked about last time, actually? Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. Hello, Rebecca. How are you tonight?
Late.
Okay. All right. So one of the most interesting things that when we get into the middle way, into the teachings of the Buddha that are the Mahayana teachings, the middle way, or the Buddha field of the Pure Land teachings, the Buddha the Buddha field, as they might call it, or the Pure Land. So with this, we learn about bodhicitta, and bodhicitta is loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And we learn about the bodhisattva. The bodhisattva is the holy enlightened being. And this is the human being who is on the path to purify themselves through the progressive path to become enlightened, to become a Buddha. And also in the Mahayana, in this middle way teaching, we are introduced to the 6 paramitas. The 6 paramitas are the 6 perfections. And the 6 perfections are what the bodhisattva is working on to purify himself. So we're perfecting through our generosity, we're perfecting through our moral ethics, through our discipline, we're purifying through our patience, we're purifying through our perseverance, we're purifying through our mindfulness, through our mental concentration, and we're purifying through our wisdom awareness, through seeing all things around us and understanding things that are within us and so on, and being able to process all that in the light of being a Buddha, understanding what it is to be a Buddha. So the Bodhisattva is the holy enlightened being who is doing that. So also in the middle way, also in this Mahayana teaching, we are learning about the two truths. And this can be, quite, controversial, something that many people, will ask questions about. So feel free. It's something that we need to be able to take in and allow ourselves to process this slowly, slowly. In science, many people, many of the scientists, the physicists, and so on, are all looking for this single answer that is this one truth that satisfies everybody's questions, whether it's scientific or it's ordinary people, about what this reality is, what this truth is, what we live in, this singularity, this one thing.
Eddie.
Yes.
Eddie.
Hey.
What's Eddie, Eddie?
Is that Patricia? Rebecca, you got your microphone on. Thank you. Okay. So Grant, you have your microphone on, I think. So if you have something to say, that's fine. But otherwise, please switch it off so we're not feeding back or anything. So this singularity is something that, as I'm saying, modern people are trying to look for, and through history, people have tried to look for. The Buddhists have come to realize, and the Buddha himself came to realize, that really there are two truths. There is the truth of the phenomenal relative nature, that we are all compounded of many, many different things. And we can analyze that, and we can examine that, and we need to be able to do that, to be able to recognize the things that we hold on to, that we attach to, and the things that we have aversions to. So by saying attachment, by saying we're thinking about desire, when we're talking about aversions, we're talking about hatred. And these are two very powerful emotions that we have. These are the root emotions that we have that compound into many, many, many other emotions. And the basis of this hatred and the basis of this desire is actually ignorance, that we really don't know what's going on. So we fabricate these stories for ourselves that become these delusions, that we say we know what's going on, that we think that we know what's going on. And they're basically a series of lies, to say it very bluntly, that we create for ourselves, instead of being able to say something like, I don't know, or it's compounded, it's got many different elements to it. But the key is to be able to say, I don't know, when I don't know, rather than trying to create some kind of a delusion for ourselves that is based on just some kind of lie that we've told ourselves, or maybe it's a lie that we have accepted that has been told to us by others. So this phenomenal nature, this relative nature, is everything that we see, everything that we are, everything that we understand. Our intellectual mind is all wrapped up in relative thought. We look at things in terms of me and others, instead of being able to see that we're all the same. We look at things in terms of being real, as being existent. We think that whatever we're doing, whatever table you happen to be sitting at right now, or whatever chair or cushion that you're sitting on right now, is real, is permanent, is existent in its own right. But if we look at these things, we see that all these things are compounded. They're relative. They're made up of many, many other things. And our body, is made up of many, many, many things. So we say the basis of all these things are water, is earth, some kind of form, is fire, some kind of heat, is wind, some kind of movement, and space. These are the 5 basic elements that all things in this phenomenal world that we look at is made up of. All these things are relative to the composition of those 5 elements. So we're going to talk more about that. But this is describing the truth of the relative truth. The other truth is what we call the absolute truth, or the ultimate truth. Now, this truth can't be conceived by a human being. It is beyond our ability to be able to comprehend what it is. However, we can experience this. And what we're doing through our practices, through our teachings, we are learning how to have that experience. And we call this experience enlightenment. So we attain enlightenment through glimpses, one glimpse after another, of experiencing that ultimate absolute reality, that absolute truth that is beyond our comprehension. When we experience it, we bring it back into our ordinary mind, and we say, wow, there was something there. And the only word I have for it is something like love, because there is this union that we recognize, this coming together of things that is beyond any conceptual thought. So the relative is nothing but conceptual thought, is nothing but all these fabrications, all these appearances and so on that we give credibility to as being real. And they are real in a temporary relative sense. The absolute is something that is transcendent of that, something that is beyond that. So for us to be able to really have that experience of the absolute, what we need to do is go through a whole process of examining all the possibilities that we recognize as our ordinary life, as our relative life, until we get to the point where we say, you know what? It doesn't bring me to understanding anything anymore, and I'm just going to let it rest. I'm not going to keep pursuing all these different ideas, all these different concepts, because none of these lead anywhere to be able to help me to understand what this life is, why we have this suffering, why we are born, why we die, all these things, what all this stuff is made up of, and so on. It really, every time I find an answer, I find that there's 20 more questions that come as a result of that answer. So when we rest our mind, when we rest that investigation, and we just are peaceful, and our body is in perfect balance, our body doesn't need anything, our intellect, our brain just kind of rests. It's not jumping around. It's not going from one thought to another. It's just resting. And what happens is this wisdom of the absolute rises up. And this wisdom is within ourselves. We have this wisdom from when we are born, before we are born, with us now, and after time, because this wisdom is indestructible. This wisdom continues on and on. And when we rest our intellectual process, then there's nothing to stop this wisdom from coming up. This other stuff, these emotions block that with jumping around in our mind, and we start thinking about those things. But when we don't think about those things, the wisdom arises, and we have the glimpse of what it is of the absolute, of this absolute nature, this true nature that we call Buddha nature. And this Buddha nature means the awakened one, is being able to recognize all this, to being able to recognize the phenomenal nature, the relative nature, but also to be able to recognize and understand the absolute nature, this true nature, this ultimate nature, and to be able to see those two truths, to be able to understand that. So as we progress along our path to enlightenment, as I said, we have a glimpse of the experience of this absolute. And then we go and we end our meditation session, we come back into our relative mind, into our everyday mind, and then we say, oh, wow, that was really something special. And we try and get back to it, and maybe we don't have some success with it, but maybe the next day we go through our process to do meditation, and we find that we have another experience. We have another glimpse of that. And this glimpse maybe becomes a little bit wider, becomes a little bit deeper, becomes a little bit longer. And so by that process of doing this over and over and over again, we begin to understand, or we begin to experience this ultimate nature more and more, which we explain as love. And if you try and explain love to somebody, you know that it's non-conceptual. You have to do it in terms of something else. Well, you know how it is, how you feel about your mother, or how you feel about your father, or how you feel about your children. You know, that feeling you have when you see them, that love that you have, you know. And so you're giving people an idea of what love is by a relative way of communicating. But what the essence of that love is escapes us. We're not able to express it in any way. It has to be experienced by each and every one of ourselves to know what it is. But once you know it, then now you recognize the reality of that love, and we begin to bring that love into our ordinary lives, into our regular everyday life, and we begin to transform ourselves, because that love is so pure, is so virtuous, is so kind. It is the epitome of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity, what we call bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind. And for us to be able to stabilize that, we need to be able to overcome all those emotions, all those negative things, all those confusing things that our monkey mind is jumping around, spending time, which is blocking our heart. So in our heart, we say, our heart center, we say, this is the big mind, and this is the little mind. This is the brain mind, this is the heart mind. We have brain thoughts, we have heart thoughts. So these heart thoughts are what we are trying to recognize, what we're trying to learn. We've had them many, many times throughout our lives, and we many times have responded very well to those things. But other times we have suppressed those heart thoughts in favor of the brain thoughts, which were fabricated pleasures and fabricated delusions and fabricated hatreds and jealousies and greediness and pridefulness and so on, that manifest as many, 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 many different emotions that we say were more important than understanding what this true nature is. So now we're on this quest to be able to open up this true nature. So we recognize that there is this possibility, first, to be able to examine these two truths, to understand these two truths. So the relative truth, like I said before, is what we think is existent, that it all exists, that we think that it's permanent. We think that our life is permanent. We think our body is permanent, especially when we're young. As we get older and we start going to funerals, people around us start passing away, we start recognizing that our body is temporary, just like everything else. If we take something that seems to be permanent, like say a piece of wood, like say a table that's made of wood, and we take it outside and we leave it outside on the lawn, and we leave it out there for some period of time, maybe a couple of years, we come back and we find that that wood, that table, is just kind of breaking apart. And maybe that there's insects that are in there, and the weather has come in, the water has come in, and the sun has beat on it, and that table begins to break apart. And it becomes part of the soil, ultimately. If we take a piece of metal, the same thing, we leave it outside long enough, and the rain comes and the winter comes and so on, and we find that it starts to rust and so on, and that permanent piece of metal starts breaking apart. It seemed like it was permanent, but it's made up of all these constituent parts. And if we allow these things in the right conditions to deteriorate, they just go back into their constituent parts. We look at ourselves and we say, oh, here I am, and I've got this face, I've got this body, I've got these legs and so on, and I think it's all part of me, but if I cut off my hand and I'm holding up my hand and I say, well, is this hand Lance? And you would say, oh no, that's not Lance anymore, that's just a hand. Well, what is Lance then? That once was Lance. Now Lance has only one hand instead of two. But does he stop being Lance? But we look a little bit further and we examine the other hand, and we look at the hand and we say, well, there's skin there, and there's nails and hair and so on like that. And if we had the ability, we look a little bit underneath the skin, we see that there's muscles there, there's tissues there, there's nerves there, there's all these different invisible to us parts of our body that make up our hand. But if we look a little bit deeper, we see that those tissues are made up of molecules. And those molecules are made up of atoms. And those atoms coming all together and so on make up these molecules, which make up the tissues, which make up my hand. But when we look at those atoms, and we look at the atoms of a table, for instance, or a piece of metal, or a tree, or another animal, we see the same atoms everywhere. And we see that deeper than the atoms are these subatomic particles that we're all made up of. So the point here is that we're all made up of the same thing. All animate things that have life like we do, and inanimate things that do not appear to have life, like, say, this piece of wood, this table, or this piece of metal. But meanwhile, they're made up of molecules, they're made up of atoms. And what are the atoms doing? The atoms are spinning around like crazy. They're moving like crazy. They are, but this piece of wood seems to be just completely dead. It's not moving. It's not doing anything. But as we get deeper and deeper and deeper and looking at what the reality of that piece of wood or that object is, we see that it is moving very, 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 very much, very fast and so on. So, in other words, we are the same as the trees. We are the same as the wood. We are the same as the animals. We are the same as this planet, all the elements within this planet. We are the same as the space, the air that is between us, that is invisible to us. But if we could see the air in between us, we'd see that it's got all these molecules, it's got all this atoms, it's got all this activity that is in the space in between us that appears invisible to us. So we see that all this, is all this phenomenal nature. If we go out into space, and it appears to be a vacuum to us, but meanwhile, it's filled with all kinds of vibrations, all kinds of rays and so on that come from the sun and come from other places that we can't explain, that the scientists are always looking for answers to. And then now they're bringing back, things from the moon and they're trying to bring back things from Mars. And as they analyze them, they're saying, oh, well, they're things that we recognize. They're the same stuff that we're made up of. So all these planets and these different structures all out in space are all part of the same phenomenal nature. They appear to be real. They have appearances, but we can't see them in their whole period of their whole lifetime. We can't see what they were as constituent elements before they became those planets or those stars. And we can't see when they break apart because it takes billions of years to be able to analyze these things. But we can see, hear stuff on this planet and recognize that it's the same as everywhere else. So this is all indicative. This is all characteristic of phenomenal nature. We don't know how it got here. Many people will ask, well, what about, how was this creation created? How was all this done? Was there a supreme being who said, bam, here's the universe, here's everything, already done? And we say, well, I don't know. I know it's written, and many people believe that it's true, and maybe it is, that it comes from this supreme being in some way that is beyond our comprehension. Maybe it's true, but I don't know, because I myself haven't experienced that. I haven't seen that. I can't make that happen myself, and I haven't seen it. We could say that what we're seeing is the result of that, but again, we don't know. So for us, we say that this is phenomenal. We don't know how it got here. We don't really know how it ends. And all we know is that we are here now in this time and space, and that's all we have to work with. But what we find out is that it is our attachment to this relative nature, to this relative mind, to this investigation that is holding us back from realizing that true nature, that love that we have within our heart center, that is the absolute, that is the ultimate nature. So when we are able to rest that again, like I said a few minutes ago, then we begin to have this experience of this absolute. So we go through this process of investigation until we come to exhaustion, and then we rest, and then we have the experience that we're talking about. So all this is called conditioned phenomena. None of this is truly existent. As we've gone through, we've said that this is molecules, this is tissue, this is molecules, this is atoms. None of it is truly existent. None of it exists all by itself. It's all compounded by many other things. So, and we make excuses, or we make fabrications of what this is. We make conventions of what we call this through just being able to communicate to ourselves and being able to communicate to others. But this whole communication, this thing is just a mass of delusions. We say it appears like this. And we abide in that. We go through our whole lifetime just thinking in those terms. But when we start to think about it and say, well, things do appear this way, but they appear this way in this relative phenomenal nature. And we begin to keep that in our mind, to keep that stable, that thought stable in our mind, that it's not truly existent. It's only existent because of these conditions, of these situations. So we call this state of non-existence, we call this emptiness. And you might have heard that word before, emptiness. And what emptiness refers to is the empty nature of this phenomenal nature, that there is, that everything is compounded. It's empty of its own pure essence. What is the essence of of any of these things? If we say, what is the essence of carbon? We say carbon is what? The most ubiquitous of all the elements that we know. But when we examine carbon, then we find there's all these subatomic particles that make up carbon. So we thought at some point, as human beings, 100 years ago, we said, oh, here's the essence of carbon. But then when we were able to go deeper into that atomic structure of carbon, we find there's much more. And then the scientists are able to go deeper than that, and they find that there's more stuff there. There's nuons and muons and quarks and all this stuff. And they're looking for the God particle, something that ties all this, that holds all this together. And maybe they'll find it. They call it the God particle because this is going to reveal to us the singularity. This is going to reveal to us the true nature of all things, the one truth of all things. So we can hold that thought. We can say, okay, but we got to prove that thought. We got to understand that thought. So this emptiness, for us is what we are doing is we are binding ourselves to the thought that things are permanent. And because of that, we want to have this body. We want to have these possessions. We want to have our house. We want to have our families. We want to have all these things because these things give us identity, give us a sense of that we are part of all this, and that this is the best that can be had. Human beings, there's nothing better than being a human being. On this planet, there's no animal that is better than being a human being. There's nothing that we know of that's better than being a human being. Is there a possibility that we can go someplace else, to Mars or to some other galaxy or some other, sub-universe or whatever you want to call it, and maybe there's something that is better than a human being, other kinds of beings? Well, maybe, but we don't know. So what we need to recognize is that all this is empty of its own nature. So we recognize, so by holding on or by contemplating the emptiness of all these things, what we do is we liberate ourselves from these appearances. It's these appearances that we keep wanting to have, these possessions, or it's these appearances that we have aversions to. And how much time do we spend thinking about these things? Oh, I want that car. Oh, I want these clothes. Oh, I want this job. Oh, I want this power. Oh, I want these things. Oh, I don't like those things. Oh, I don't want those things. I don't want those people coming near me, and so on. How much time do we think about the things that we want and the things that we don't want? So how would you like to be free, liberated from that dualistic thinking all the time? Oh, I want this. Oh, I don't want that. How would you like to be free from that? How would you like to be liberated from that? And if you do, how would you go about doing that? So for us, through the understanding of phenomenal nature, the two truths, and we see emptiness, we see that there's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to be aversion to. It's all just fabrications. It's all just conceptions of our mind that makes us think that it's real. Why would you want to hold on to something that is just a figment of your imagination? It's like holding on to a dream. We've had so many dreams. Many of them we've forgotten, most of them. But there are dreams that we had maybe when we were a kid, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, 10 years old, whatever, that we still remember. We still remember. And maybe there was something, that made us say, oh, that was true. I really want to follow that dream. I want to hold on to that dream. And how many times have we had some kind of a dream that we wanted to do and spent our whole life chasing this particular dream? Maybe it was just a daydream. Maybe it was just an idea that we wanted to have. And we get to the end of our lives and we say, you know what? It was just a dream. It was just my imagination. And here I spent my whole life wasted away chasing this dream. So if we can liberate ourselves from this, then we are experiencing freedom. And this freedom is indicative of that absolute nature, that ultimate nature. It's free of grasping. It's free of aversion. It's free of ignorance. Why is it free of ignorance? Because all this intellectual thought we have is all conceptual stuff that is all based in the phenomenal world, in the phenomenal mind. So when we can transcend that phenomenal mind and be able to experience things as a true nature, as what we would say a Buddha, now everything has a different aspect to it. We see the two truths. We're not bound by it. Right now, we are totally bound by those appearances. We are bound by the conditions. We are bound by all the obstacles that we create for ourselves. This is what we maneuver in all the time. We're locked up in our dualistic nature. But when we can free ourselves, now we don't have that. So what is an indication of that? Well, if you look at some of the great spiritualists who, have the appearance of being enlightened, they're very simple people. They live very simple lives. They're very virtuous people. They wouldn't bring harm to anyone. Not to a human being, but not even to an animal, not even to an insect, if they had that kind of control. And they don't have to interact all the time. And you look at the great beings like that throughout history, and you'll see that there is this common thread that goes through those enlightened ones. And I'm talking about like the Buddha, I'm talking about like Jesus, I'm talking about like Mohammed, I'm talking about Moses. There's so many beings. I'm talking about the Hindu people and so on. All these different traditions, the essence of these and those people who spoke of these things in their essence level spoke of these in very simple ways, very pure ways of expressing love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. A holy enlightened mind, that's the only thing that we really need to be able to abide in. Everything else is just an aberration. Everything else is just a confusion. So we say that this emptiness of this relative nature the absolute nature subsumes all of that. How it does it, again, is beyond our human ability to be able to comprehend that. But we allow ourselves to experience that. To be a spiritualist is to experience. We can learn things from books, we can learn things from teachers about what they say it is, and that is vicarious experience. But by gnosis, by actually having that experience, is a whole lot different. another analogy is, I spoke about how do you explain love? How would you explain the taste of sugar? What sweet is? How would you explain that to somebody? And I'm sure that there's been poems, love poems that have been written. Oh, your lips are as sweet as the peaches on my tree, and so on, and so many different ways, romantic different ways that sugar has been explained. And you can recite these poems, you can write these words, and so on, and people will hear them. But do they really know what peach sweetness tastes like?
Lance, I was
Yes.
gonna, it's interesting, this part of the conversation is sparking my interest because of the line of work I do. We look at like language and like conversational language, where I ask someone, well, what does an M&M taste like? Sort of what you're describing right now, and like peanutty, chocolatey, crunch, all these things. And actually none of those are correct, right? What is it? Really, it's me actually eating it, is that the behavior of doing it is actually what it tastes like. It's otherwise, it's just this language that describes this phenomenon. But this is part of what I do professionally, when you break apart like the description of something versus the actual aspect of doing something. And a lot of people don't understand those as two separate events. Because we obviously relate, like we're a social species. So we, when we hear things, we relate those as the actual experience, when in fact it's just someone else's description of an event. And I don't know, like I'm thinking about it right now. I'm digesting what you're saying and overlaying it with what I do academically and technically, and thinking about like kind of unlayering that. So that just sort of popped into my head because I was working on that yesterday. So
what is your profession, Sarah?
Without it being overly complicated, I'm a behavior analyst. And so I look at why people do what they do. Like, why do we, engage in certain behaviors, and kind of designing and optimizing environments for people that are positive. So like right now I work primarily with individuals with disabilities, but it can be applied. It's sort of a science fundamentally like gravity that's can apply to any person. So it's understanding human behavior like from an environmental perspective.
Who is your employer?
I own my own company. I employ myself.
Oh, wow.
Lance can come work with me. You all can come work with me if you want.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your comment. Thank you for the offer.
You're welcome.
If I get tired, I'll do that. So yeah, so the point that Zara was just making, that if you want to know what something tastes like, an M&M was her example. My example was some sugar, so a peach or something, is give somebody that peach and let them eat that peach. Let them eat that sugar cube, and then they will know what sweet is. And it never can be taken away from them. It's an experience. So this experience of the transcendent is the same in that regard, that we can talk about it, we can read about it, and so on. But until we have the experience, it's a vicarious experience through the words and so on of others and so on. So we have to give ourselves the ability to have that experience. And part of what we're doing here is to be able to set the stage for every one of us to be able to have that experience. We can't give you enlightenment, but what we can do is tell you the way in which the Buddha had enlightenment, and to be able to say that we've had some success ourselves at following this advice. And yes, it does result in this enlightenment and being able to have this. Now, maybe it's very small. It was only a small glimpse, and maybe there was 2 or 3 glimpses that I was able to put together or something like that. But yes, I know that there is some validity in this because of my experience. Can I tell you what it's like or something like that? No, I can't tell you that any more than I can tell you what sweet is. But when you have the experience, then we can look at each other and say, oh, now you know what this peach tastes like, don't you? Oh, now you know what this enlightenment is like, don't you? And we see that our behavior is changed. We become more virtuous. We become more happy. We become more satisfied. We want to eat more peaches.
So Lance, help me with this.
Okay.
The pathway to enlightenment is, in part, or the ability to recognize the relativity and transcend the relative truth in order to be able to separate it from ultimate truth, which has to be experienced. Now,
not exactly to separate it, because you can't separate it.
Well, distinguish.
Or to recognize that what we are locked up in is the relative.
Right.
But we also have the absolute that we don't recognize.
All right. But as I come closer or become better at freeing myself from the captivity of relative truth.
Yes.
And experiencing ultimate truth.
Yes.
Then I am, as I do that in bits and pieces,
Yeah.
I am glimpsing.
Yes.
Is that?
I'm sorry, you just locked up those last 2-3 words you just had there.
When I'm transcending relative truth and understanding the difference between relative and ultimate truth, and experiencing, as opposed to totally understanding, ultimate truth, then I am glimpsing enlightenment.
Correct.
And the more practice, the broader become my glimpses.
Right. Now we're using this word enlightenment to identify, that reality, if you will.
Okay.
That is conceptual. But, the reality of the absolute is non-conceptual. So we have to experience it with something that is beyond our intellect. That's why we have to experience it with our heart.
Is enlightenment ever achieved completely, or is it always just a matter of glimpses here and there?
Sure, it's complete. Sure, there's many Buddhas, there's many beings, there's many great enlightened beings. Yes, that are here with us now, and that have been in the past and will be in the future. Sure.
So once enlightenment is achieved, can one backslide, or is one there forever?
Well, having glimpses of it, you're not stable in it, so you can certainly backslide. But one once becomes a Buddha, one becomes a fully enlightened being, a fully realized being, there's no going backwards. But there's no communication, there's no appearance at the level that we experience things.
How does one know when one has achieved enlightenment rather than just glimpses? How does one know when one is fully enlightened?
Well, in the beginning, you question it. You say, is this valid? And then you begin to, because we have a system, the system of Buddhism, the Dharma, we analyze it over and over again. And we, gradually begin to see that, yes, this was valid. This was real. And I like the way this is. I prefer this than being deluded. I prefer this from being hateful. I prefer this from being desirous and so on. So I choose to be enlightened, and I keep myself on that path. I like my behavior better. People like me better for a number of reasons that are all conceptual reasons, because we're still in the phenomenal world, but we're having these transcendent experiences.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. From the perspective of the ultimate truth, we're looking at everything up to this point. We've been looking at everything from the perspective of the phenomenal truth, of phenomenal reality. Now, from the perspective of ultimate truth, that no phenomena, none of this relative stuff has ever had any existence itself. And this is true of our subjective mind. It's never really existed. As well as its objects, the phenomena that appears to it. So we think it's all real, but from the perspective of the ultimate, it's all just figments. It's all just fabrication. It's beyond comprehension. And that's what's so difficult for us to apprehend as ordinary beings. But as we have the experiences, like Ed was just asking, as we have those glimpses, the more we can recognize that absolute truth. We can see that. But not with our eyes, not with our brain, but with our heart center. And the more we become that awakened one. Now, in the beginning, this certainly sounds like a stretch. But the invitation is there. It won't hurt you if you want to do it, to find this out for yourself. And that's what the invitation is. That's what the Buddha did. Everything that the Buddha, the enlightened one, manifests through the body, speech, and mind is for the enlightenment of all beings. It's for the freedom of all beings. If you love somebody, you want it to be free. You want your children to be free. You want your children to be happy. You don't want them to be enslaved in any way. But we enslave ourselves. We don't need to have somebody with a bullwhip telling us what to do. We do it all by ourselves. Over and over and over and over again. I got to have this. Once I have this, I will be happy. And then you find out, now I got it. Now I got to protect it. I got to do all these other things. And it never ends. And the most subtle of all those things is our very life, our own body. So this is a way, this is the pathway to recognizing that what we call life is all just an illusion that we create for ourselves. We are the architects of this illusion. And then once we have this illusion, now we become the engineers of it. We have to navigate through this illusion. Sometimes the illusions have winds and they're blowing us this way or the other. And sometimes there's rough roads and we have to navigate over there. So we have to engineer ways. We have to modify our story to be able to bring that all into some kind of control, which is just a fabrication.
Hey, Lance, you had touched on emptiness for a second or for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is emptiness nothingness?
No. Nothingness is, the word for nothingness is nihilism. That nothing matters, nothing is real, and so on like that. So in nihilism, the two truths wouldn't exist either. But in Buddhism, in this philosophy, we say that this does exist, but it exists temporarily. And to look at it this way, we have given ourselves a gift of life. And with this gift of life, we have the ability to be able to liberate ourselves from needing this gift. Imagine what it is to be totally free. Now you can say, oh, I don't want that. It'd be nice to be able to fly around the sky, but if I can't do that, I'm happy just to be here on the planet. And if I need to fly around the sky, I'll get in an airplane or something like that. Maybe I'm happy in my suffering. Am I getting old? Am I getting sick? How many times have you been in a situation that you said, I've had enough? Maybe, I've been so sick, I wish I would die. I know, having been a heavy partier in my day, I know, getting a hangover, sometimes you wish you were dead. Getting the flu, sometimes you're so sick with the flu. And that's as bad as I've had it. I've been very fortunate, but there are others who have had terrible, terrible diseases, terrible, terrible injuries. And many of them show great courage to say, I want to maintain this life. I want to come back. I want to be able to deal with, whatever the results of this injury or whatever the results of this illness is, because I'm not ready to go. For myriads of reasons that we can't know ourselves, but they know. There's many people who talk about having what they would call the near-death experience from an accident or an illness or something, and their body stops functioning, and they have this out-of-body experience, and they can see themselves, and they have this aura of light and so on, and then they have a choice. And the people that relate this to us are the ones who made the choice to come back. How many other people made the choice to keep on going?
Hey, Lance, I have a question about that, just sort of a conceptual, abstract question. For people who have these sorts of near-death experiences, the choice to go back, do you believe that that is somehow part of their attachment to their human life? They don't want to let go of that?
You mean to come back to this life?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. For a number of reasons. It may be because they feel that they have to be there for their family or something like that, or maybe they're attached to their jobs, whatever psychological thing it might be, or maybe it's because they realize that they're not pure enough to be able to go to that which is figuratively the I, and be able to stand up to that truth. So the way I always explain this is by asking the question, where were you before you were born?
I don't know personally.
And where do you go when you die?
I also don't know that.
It's the same place. And when we die and we go there, we don't have the freedom, we don't have the ability, the stability in our freedom to be able to remain without the physical body, without the intellect. We need to have this body. We need to have these possessions. So because it's not able to do that, it starts looking for another life. It starts looking for another body. An example of this is in Christianity and Judaism, in most of the traditions that I know about, when they talk about when you die, you go meet God. You go meet the Supreme Being, and you have to be judged by the Supreme Being. And the Supreme Being is so bright, so powerful, that if you're not able to stand up, you cower away. Oh, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I'm not free enough. I am not the same as that supreme being. So therefore, let me go back to that which I am comfortable with, or that which I recognize as my inability to stand up to be that being. So I come back to more purify myself, so that the next time I come round, and maybe this next time, I'll be able to become in union with that supreme being.
Lance,
Sorry,
have you ever thought about, I'm wondering, this is sort of maybe slightly morbid, but have you thought about if that were to happen to you, would you let go of your body?
Of course.
You would. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think about it.
I mean, I think about it too. I think about it like if I were in a car accident or whatever, like I
Of
think
course.
about, am I ready to die? Like, am I at peace with whatever my existence has been to date?
Of course. And there's many emotions that are tied up in that. So what I'm trying to do, of course, is to be able to release my emotions, so that when I come to that point, I can leave my body and not feel I have to come back. However, there is the Bodhisattva, the idea of the Bodhisattva, which is introduced in this Mahayana middle way teaching. And this is the holy enlightened being, and this is the being who postpones their freedom, who postpones their pure enlightenment for the benefit of the enlightenment of other beings. That I have a teaching, I have a gift, I have something that I want to share with everybody because they are suffering, and I choose not to be free until everyone can be free along with me.
I read the glimpse after glimpse every day, like a passage, and they were talking about, I think I may have asked this a couple of weeks ago, about people who do reach that state of enlightenment, but intentionally come back for the reason you described. So they have a natural life, they die, but they make a decision to come back into a human existence because of what you just described.
That's right. So, it's part of being a spiritual being, and contemplating that, and meditating on that, and preparing yourself for that. To just keep suppressing our imminent death and not looking at what the possibilities are with that death is becoming delusional. And it's something that we've experienced that many, many, many times. And I would say that all of us here tonight, because of the virtue of who we are, where we are, what resources we have right now, and the degree of freedom that we have right now, we are pretty high up on that scale of purification. There's a whole lot more to go, but we're certainly not at the level of those who are going to, wind up in the lower realms of being an animal, or being a hell being, or being a hungry ghost who is constantly miserable, constantly insatiable, and so on, for the things that they have done, and so on. We have gotten to a very good point. So now the question becomes: am I satisfied with this, or do I want to be able to purify myself more, to become enlightened, to become more pure spirit?
Wondering, has anyone in this group ever read the 12 steps for AA, like the book? Yeah. Okay, cool. So Lance, I'm not sure if I've read the small book, 12 Steps, 12 Editions. I have a very close friend of mine is a recovering alcoholic, and some of what you're describing, there's such a fundamental parallel, like you said, across, like there's a similarity and symmetry in some of these messages, or these the effort to transcend, right, past, like, for example, an attachment to alcohol. What is that a symptom of? Ego, pride, like there's core symptoms. So I'm reading that right now to support my close friend, but I'm listening to you right now, and it's nice to kind of have these things kind of come full circle, like the beauty in these messages. So
Yeah, and the Buddhism is incredible because so much of the truth of the human condition is expressed in the Dharma. So, the genius of the Buddha, was he was able to articulate that. Did he learn that, or did he spontaneously, experience that himself, and through his genius was able to articulate it in a way? And we're following that suit. But out of that, so many other traditions have come. And then there's traditions that are older than Buddhism that speak of the same things. The problem is many of all these things, and the Buddhism included, gets layered, and ego starts stepping on it and blocking things up and explaining things in a way that, oh, you need me to explain this to you. You can't do this by yourself. You need me, which is, of course, a contamination of the purity of that which needs to be communicated and so on. But that's the reality. The Buddhism goes through great lengths to be able to preserve the essence of the truth. The books that we read and so on, and the teachings that we receive that are given by the lamas, by the teachers and so on, they are reading the oldest books that they possibly can. And they are reading from those books page by page, line by line, word by word, so that everybody gets the same message. Then they might give commentary on that, their experience on that. But the point is that they're going through great lengths to be able to preserve the integrity of the essence of the teachings. And that's very important.
You've referred often to the parallels with different spiritual traditions, and which I've found, which I appreciate. In a group that I'm in, another group that I'm in, I'm reading. We're reading a book by Christian theologian C.S. Lewis,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote, I think this was in the 1940s, and he gives the analogy in a Christian context of Christianity being a hallway. I mean, that is basic Christianity, whatever that is. And then there are all these rooms off the hallway where various groups go and declare themselves this denomination or that denomination. But then what gradually happens is they tend to close the door to the hallway, and they start refining their own view of what Christianity is that typically departs more and more from what's really in the hallway. And different groups are doing that different ways, which I think is kind of, I found that a very useful analogy because I see it going on.
Well, that's right. I agree with that. And I'm not a great scholar, believe me. And I read some C.S. Lewis a number of years ago, and I don't remember what it was I read, except that it resonated with me.
Yes. Yeah.
And the Christ, I am a Christian.
Yeah.
No doubt. I am a Buddhist. No doubt. I am a Jew. No doubt. I am a Hindu, no doubt. All those different traditions, the essence of all those traditions is the very same.
Right.
But then, like I said, layer upon layer, how it's gotten bastardized, and confused for the aggrandizement of those who are trying to perpetuate their particular voice, their particular system.
We could have a main hallway that said something like meaning of life. And then we have all these rooms.
Yeah.
That then go off and close the door.
So we want to stay in the hallway, to use that analogy.
Right.
We want to stay in the light. We want to stay in the clear light. And for me, from what I've studied over the years, is that the Buddhism articulates that better than any other system I know, that I've been exposed to, that I've had the fortune of being able to discover and recognize and so on. It has answered so many questions for me over my career and so on. And I feel like I was born into this, and I feel like I have a great gift that I was born into this, and I feel like that my work, whatever I can do now is, I'll do whatever I can, but it may not be, it's never going to be complete.
Fair enough. Thank you.
But I'd rather do this than anything else. So our meditation is the key to being able to enter this. Some people will argue, well, you can intellectually enter this. I don't know anybody that's done it. Maybe there is. I can't argue. I can't argue that. But the way we're taught it is that we listen. Means that we listen to the teachers, we listen to the teachings, we read, we're listening, the books that we read, the scriptures and so on. And then we contemplate that. And then we practice what it is that is being said to us in those books. We actually practice, we change our lives to put those things into practice. And then we contemplate that. So it's like constantly being refined. It's constantly being gone over and over and over again. And then as we're doing that, we have these glimpses, of light. We have these glimpses of truth. We have these glimpses of reality, of where this opens up to us to that transcendent state. And that gives us the confidence that we are doing the right thing, that we are on this path. What is the best thing for a human being? What is the highest level for a human being? Is it to raise a family? Is it to be a carpenter? Is it to be a doctor? Is it to be, a teacher? What's the highest thing to be a human being? So, is it to be a spiritualist? Is it to be able to leave, to be able to be free enough to leave this samsara, to leave this ocean of suffering behind?
So, Lance, this is Grant.
Yes.
Can you hear me? I've had technical difficulties the whole night.
I'm fine.
My question is, there's this Eightfold Path, but when you talk about nirvana and stuff like that, it seems like you're looking at this mindfulness or going back to this egoless primordial Buddha nature self. Why is it called why is it called just the meditation path? If there's really these 8 important things that the Buddha tells us to do, and then I guess on the other side of that too is you have these expert meditator gurus out there that were morally reprehensible people, and so these people so these gurus were probably they probably could totally free themselves from ego and thought and reach these incredibly higher states, but the other 7 parts of the path were probably very failing. So I was wondering if you could talk to that.
Well, we talked a little bit about that last time, and I'm sorry that you weren't able to join us last week. And we had.
Well, I did listen to a previous recording of that where you talked about.
Okay, good.
The
Eightfold Path is a means of evaluating our lives, to be able to see, what we are doing in our everyday lives through these 8 points of view, so being able to understand that. And it helps us to be honest with ourselves where we are. Now, as you point out, some people, have the abilities to have had the some degree of enlightenment. And then maybe for different reasons, and maybe there are reasons that we don't understand because we're not at that level, that they can do things that may appear to be bastardizations or contaminations that would contaminate us, But at their level, maybe for them, they can do that. The problem is how it lands on other people. For them, they may not be harmed by it, but what it does, it contaminates the minds of those people that see those things. And then they get confused saying, oh, I thought that this was a system of virtue. And here these people are doing things that are non-virtuous, and they seem to be getting away with it. But meanwhile, they're talking about, this enlightenment and so on. So if it brings harm, if it brings confusion, if it brings suffering to people's minds, I think it's impure. What the motivation is, we would have to look at the motivation. Was it a self-aggrandizement? Did those people have 3 Rolls Royces in the garage or something like that? What was their motivation to be able to do this? So we have to look at that. My point is, and my rule of thumb is to use the Eightfold Path and to keep it simple. And when it gets too complicated, I'll go away. And I don't need all the accoutrements. I don't need all the stuff, to prove to me that somebody has had some kind of an attainment. The best attainment I'm looking for is a guy in a robe, the fool on the hill, sitting by himself, So I don't know if that answers your question, but it is something that we have to examine. And what we're doing in Buddhism 101 is to begin to give you the tools to be able to do that analysis. Everybody has to do it because you have to filter it through your own life and your own experiences, where you are and so on. So what we're doing here is, through the Buddha's teachings, is being able to give you those tools, to give you the vocabulary to understand what that is. Does that explain something to you?
And it does. I'm not sure I, totally agree about, being apologetic to the people that were, really, terrible, misogynistic, people and had done all kinds of, sexual misconduct. And I'm not sure I agree that, I need to understand the context of their actions that to me were very harmful and wrong and not what I would consider moral. But, I feel like each of the Eightfold Paths is critical. And it seems like, some of once again, the teaching sort of elevates this meditation part of the Eightfold Path in terms of reaching nirvana as a much more important aspect than the other 7.
Well, the only thing we can change is ourselves. And Buddhism is a philosophy of oneself, of being able to purify oneself in order to recognize oneself as an awakened being. So what other people are doing, why they're doing it, and so on, is something that we have to guard against. We have to have forgiveness. We have to have compassion for their misgivings or whatever, their confusions that have created that in their lives, and then they're foisting that on other people. But the thing that we need to do first is to be able to maintain our own stability in the face of all this confusion, in the face of all this adversity and so on. Then the rest becomes politics, the rest becomes a lot of other features and so on. But the primary thing is to recognize yourself as the Buddha. So if I can continue a little bit. So, we do this through direct experience, like we've been talking about with meditation. We purify our obscurations, and we develop realizations. So what that means is that through our experiences of the transcendent that come by way of the meditation, we recognize the things that pull us back. What stops our meditation? They are impurities that we fixate on, obsessions that may be born in ignorance, that may be born in hatred, that may be born in desire or pridefulness or jealousy. So we need to be able to recognize those, and then we need to be able to recognize the causes of those. And through that, and applying the antidotes, which we learn at the same time, because there's an antidote for all these things. This is what the Dharma teaching is. This is what the system is. It's a system, a way of being able to analyze this. Then we purify those obscurations so that when we go into that transcendent state, we can stay there, and we can even go higher in that without being pulled back as quickly as we might have been before. Now, we might get to another level or a higher level, or reach a point where we break our concentration and we find that we're pulled back again because we haven't purified enough yet. And that's okay. That's part of the process. That's what we have to go through. It's like tempering ourselves, you know? So we have realization, or we have examples of what it is to be that pure nature. So we read, we study, we hear the stories of the masters who have experienced these things. We don't read about the guy that's in jail who murdered 5 or 10 people or something like that with no sense of remorse or anything. We're not studying his life, but we might be studying the guy in jail who is there out of principle to be able to demonstrate to people the wrongs that are being done by unjust laws or rules or something like that. That might be somebody to learn from. And that we develop realization out of that, and realization out of the one who is there with no redemption at all. And be able to see that these things are all part of the appearances of our relative nature. And how by it's a thin line that separates them, that need choices, and we need to educate ourselves to be able to make those choices. So this is the path to ultimate truth, to be able to develop that. It becomes a choice for us to enter into this. Nobody tells you that you have to come into Buddhism on 101 and do these things or read these books or do meditation, but it's there for you if you want to do it. So it's your own choice. Everyone has that choice. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Who said that? Rebecca?
That was me.
Okay.
So I find myself intimidated, and that doesn't happen much, by the vastness of the body of knowledge that seems to be on the other side of this class. Right. Everything that you have covered in the last couple of cycles of the class, I'm like, okay, I get that right. It rings true. I'm comfortable with that. And then I look over here and I have searched Amazon for the word Buddhism in the title of the book, and it stopped counting at 20,000. And it just seems like there's this whole other world of tiny, nuanced, very delicate, very specific additional knowledge.
Commentaries.
And there's a piece of me that thinks if it gets that complicated again, then that's probably not it either.
Well, let me qualify that if I can, please.
Okay.
And in Buddhism, there are in the Sanskrit language. Sanskrit language was the language of the Buddha that he taught in 2,600 years ago. And he taught the sutras. His teachings were called the sutras. They're like what we would call the Gospels in the New Testament of the Western Bible and so on. So there's a finite number of those. There's 100 books or so of the sutras that are complete teachings of the Buddha that have been transcribed, translated into many, 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 many different languages. And then there are what's called the Shastras. The Shastras are all the commentaries, not all the commentaries, but many of the commentaries that have come from the masters of the Buddhism that has read and studied those sutras, and now they're giving their take on it.
So it's like the Talmud.
It's like the Talmud.
Right, with a little piece of text, and
No.
everybody's got their little thought bubble out on the side.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So
Okay.
you can go chasing all those Shastras, or you can find that there's a few teachers that really resonate with you for some particular reason, and you can stay with them. But if you open yourself up to all that stuff, it will drive you crazy.
Thank you. I feel so much better. Okay.
So my thing is always keep it to the root text, and then have those trusted teachers who are speaking to that root text and not trying to embellish it too much.
All right. Because I just couldn't see. I mean, I've been down 3 or 4 paths in my life already. And the idea of taking on, oh God, now I got to go learn all that to be able to, to know if this is, because it seems very fundamental and simple in its, basic form here. And
let me put it to you another way.
Okay.
In Buddhism, there are scholars who spend their lifetimes writing and studying the sutras and the shastras and writing their own commentaries and so on like that. And they're very intellectual. They are the intellectuals.
Okay.
And then there are the yogis. The yogis, they know some of the stuff. They maybe have read some of the sutras and maybe they've read some of the shastras. But the yogis spend their time becoming the Buddha, changing their lives in a very fundamental way, keeping it simple. They have very small egos. Scholars can get very big egos in a big hurry.
Yeah.
But the yogis, to me, are the essence of what it is to be awakened. Okay. And there's lots of people like that. Our generation is full of people like that. We were very fortunate. Those of us who were born in the middle, late 40s and the 50s and so on, there was a lot of change that was happening, but there was this period of enlightenment that'll be written about, that they'll be reading, for thousands of years. There was a period of enlightenment. And we will see that come again in 2050, 2060. We may not live to see it. I probably won't, but our children will, our children's children will, and so on, to experience, because this thing goes around. And there are these periods of enlightenment. Then there are these periods of what seem to be, no enlightenment.
Yeah.
And so my point here is that as a yogi, we begin to get into that rhythm. We become that, we harmonize with that. And we stay even with it. We're not going up, we're not going down. We stay even in that. We see all things. We take the middle way, the middle path. So the wisdom is recognized and developed from that point of view.
That was very reassuring. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the question, Rebecca. That was, I found the question and the answer helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thanks.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah, this is good stuff. What do you think of the two truths? I mean, how does that, when I first heard it, it blew my mind.
Hey, Lance, can I make a comment? Right before the Buddha died, Ananda, one of his main disciples, asked him, "What are we going to do without you?" And the answer he gave was, "Everything I have taught, everything I have said is a lie. Investigate it for yourself. Search it for yourself. Just don't take my word for it. You are an enlightened being. You have the same nature as I do. Look for it."
Yeah, thank you. What does yoga mean? Yoga means union. What is a yogi? A yogi is one who is in union. And union with the two truths. Who allows yourself, we have to operate in this phenomenal world, but we know that it is temporary. And because it's temporary, just like our clothes, we take them off at the end of the day, we're naked. And it's just me. And then next day, I'm going to put on another suit of clothes. And our life is just like that, So we're going to be talking about, in a few weeks, we're going to be talking about what's called the 6 bardos. And the bardos are the intermediate states of being a human being, the phases that we go through as being a human being. And it's going to give some more clarity into the practicality of what all this means, of how this all, plays out. So, it's one chapter here, gives us this snapshot of a particular piece of it, but we need to be able to see the whole book before we can form, a real clear view of what all this is. So, because the different parts help to clarify other parts that may seem murky for us right now. So keep your mind open, keep your heart open, practice virtue, trust, trust the teachings, trust the teacher. You don't have to trust the teacher and see his or her peccadillos, because we certainly have all those, but see what they are saying, see what it is, and test what it is that they are saying, and then see the wisdom in that, and then let the wisdom come in, test the wisdom. Wisdom is the result of experimentation. Sometimes we fail with it. Sometimes we succeed with it. We learn more from our failures than we learn from our successes. Allow yourself to fail. Does that all make sense? Zara, you're a scientist at this. Does this make sense to you?
Oh, definitely, yes. For my analytical mind, it makes complete sense, yes.
So the next time, next week, there's some more stuff here that needs to be covered, more stuff about karmic interdependence and about emptiness that we need to go into a little bit more. So I think before we leave this chapter, there's not enough time to do it tonight, but next week we'll explore this, because we all need to have a pretty good understanding of where it is that we're coming from with this. And I don't want to leave too many cracks in the foundation of what we've been talking about. So you can see that it's getting abstract. What do you think of that, Ed?
I'm looking forward to next week.
Okay. So you should ponder this week and read, read this chapter again.
Right. All right.
If you didn't read it in preparation for tonight, you should read it again. We've read these things over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times I've read this book and these chapters.
How many sessions are there in Buddhist 101? And how do you decide is 101 just end arbitrarily at some point? I mean, what?
Well, what we decided to do with this was because we had a core of people who were really interested, and there weren't at the time any new people, that what we decided to do was to complete this book.
I see. Okay.
So we're doing it in 8 sessions so that, that. But if there was enough people who said, you know what, I need to go back to chapter 1, and I don't want to wait until you do it another time, I'd like to do it now, I'll be more than glad to have another session where we start at the very beginning and establish, to either go back over it or to introduce it to people that haven't had it yet. So Soho is here for the first time. Maybe she would be interested in that. Grant is here. Maybe he would be interested in that. Ed, maybe you'd be interested in that. Maybe there's others here that would be interested in that, and I'll be more than glad to do that. What do you think of that? Would you like to get the first chapters and start over from the beginning?
Are you addressing?
I'm addressing you and Soho and Grant right now.
Yeah, I would like to.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
If it's not too much disturbance.
To follow up on Ed's question, there's also like a 102 class and a 201
Right.
class. Is that true? And what's the difference among the?
Yeah.
Well, the differences are, that, like I said, we have these core of people who have gone through the fundamental Buddhism 101 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times. So we needed to progress. We needed to do more. So the 102 is actually practice, is we're concentrating on practicing these things by doing some of the Buddhist practices that we do. So you're welcome to join that, but if you don't have those fundamentals, you may find that a little befuddling. So you should have the fundamentals down pretty good. Then the Buddhism 201 now has migrated. Now we're doing the Noble Film Night. So we're showing, we've got a library of many films that speak about the culture, as it was 1,000 years ago, and dramatizations of life 1,000 years ago or modern life with people in a way, and tells the story of practically what Buddhism is and so on. So Saturday night, we're doing that, and everybody's welcome to join that, and would be really good. This next week, we're going to be talking about the Yogis of Tibet, which is about our lineage, and our lineage is a lineage of the yogis and not so much the scholars. There's other lineages that are very scholarly, but our lineage is not. So it's going to show, what that means with some interviews, and it's very good. It's really very good. So that's 102, 201. And then on Thursday nights, we have Medicine Buddha practice. We do to bring healing to all beings. So all this has grown out of the group that we have who has been doing Buddhism 101 now for a couple of years. So if you want to start Buddhism 102, or rather Buddhism 101 again from the very beginning, we can do that. The 2 nights that I have available would be either Tuesday night or Wednesday night.
Lance, would you be doing those simultaneously with us Monday night? So
yeah, I'm not going to stop Monday night.
Okay, and it would be the 7 o'clock time slot?
Do the 7 o'clock time slot on either Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
So is that a meditation class?
Is it a meditation class?
Yeah, included in this.
No, before we do include some meditation in it from time to time.
Mm.
Once we really get the fundamentals down, then we start introducing some meditation. So about 2 or 3 weeks into the fundamental class, then we start doing some meditation practice. So we do the two things at the same time. It's not all just academic, but there's some meditation as well.
Okay.
So Ed, remember we did the breathing exercises we did, and we did the Omahang purification and so on. So we'll do that.
But the current 101, what we're in,
Yeah.
will continue indefinitely.
Well, and yeah, until we finish this book. Then I want to go. The next book after this is going to be the stages of meditation.
Okay.
Where we're really going to look into that, and that'll take us, 3 or 4, 5 months to get through that book.
Okay. When do we get through this book approximately?
Well, each chapter is maybe one session, sometimes 2 sessions.
But how many chapters are there?
Well,
Ed would get through it a whole lot faster if we'd stop asking so damn many questions, right?
oh, that's okay. There's 17 chapters, so we're on chapter 7.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
That's okay. No, so there's likely to be 2 more cycles of the 101.
You see, I thought I was taking a class with a bunch of beginners like me. Instead, I'm the only beginner here, or was.
Ed, I would say I'm a beginner. Like, I think probably a lot of us are beginners. Like, this is my 3rd go around in it, and I'm definitely a beginner.
Yeah, me too.
So, if you're taking notes, if we've recorded all these things, and all the beginning sessions we have is on YouTube. So if you want to go and sit and watch them on YouTube, I strongly suggest that. So that's a really good way to refresh yourself with what's there. So now, it sounds like now you're really seeing, that this is good stuff. And maybe now we become, better note takers, or we're paying more attention. We're reading the chapters over again and so on. So that's good. That's good. I can't tell you, I've been doing this for 15 years. And I'm always learning new stuff. I'm always finding a new way to look at things. And most of the time it's because of some question that somebody asked, and it gives a different way of looking at it, and gives it more substance, gives it more understanding.
And so you've been teaching this for 15 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you and everybody else for your patience.
It's thank you. It's a pleasure. So next time I want to talk about, I did say already, karmic interdependence and emptiness and so on. So there's a little bit more to talk about. And it is part of the 101. It is part of 101. So if you need to go back, look at YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel, and that way, do you use YouTube at all?
Yep.
Ed, do you use it?
Somewhat, not a lot.
Well, we can send you a link to it and make it easy for you, and just click on it, and there's going to be all our sessions. So it's a great way to get, refresh yourself.
Okay.
Do you want to start a new session? You want to start a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night session, and we'll start again, and we'll talk about the fundamentals.
I'd be happy to participate if anyone else is interested.
What's a
I
better
like
night?
it.
What's a better night, Tuesday or Wednesday?
If it's at 7 o'clock, I'm flexible with the needs of the group.
All right. Ed, would you want to join?
I think one night a week is about what I have right now.
Okay. Well, then you can do the YouTube on your own then.
Right.
Okay. Soho, would you like to have a start at the beginning?
I I think I'm gonna stay with Monday, and then I will check on the YouTube.
Okay.
And
All
do I need to get a book or?
When we every week we send out the announcement for the coming session, and included in that announcement
Yeah.
is the chapter,
Okay.
because this book is no longer available right now. It's out of print.
Okay.
So, but it's an excellent book. It is a terrific book. So, and then there's other books that we use, but this particular one is very, very good. So each chapter I send to you. So if you send me your email, I'll be more than glad to send you the, the information you need to be able to get the text and so on.
Okay. Do I respond to the email that I received the Zoom class or?
Yeah, you can do that. Just
Okay.
respond to that, and that
Okay.
comes to me.
Okay.
Michael, did you have something?
Yeah, I put the name of the channel and the link to the YouTube channel in the chat box.
Yeah, I got it.
Zoho,
Okay.
you know how to use the
Yeah,
chat
I got
box?
it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. Zara, if there's things you want to do, we can do that together. And if during the daytime is better for you, or we can set up a regular meeting, whatever. It doesn't have to be the evening if it's more convenient for you.
Is there anybody else who's interested in, I would feel horrible to just be selfishly having Lance redo 101 for my benefit. I've had the privilege already of hearing him twice. Is anyone else?
No,
Grant or Rebecca?
I'm probably going to just look at the YouTube videos. I
Okay.
think meeting only once a week is about my limit right now. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, no. It's fine. No,
That's
good.
my world too.
Okay.
It's so funny. Lance, you'll appreciate this. I tell people date night is Saturday night for me with you all. Like, I'm like my posse. Like, I literally, Saturday night is blocked from 7 p.m. on. I'm hanging out with my crew.
Date night with the Buddha.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. Like, it's literally part of my routine now. Like, I crave it. Like, I miss it when I'm not there. And then I'm excited that I get to come back on Monday. It feels really good. Like, spiritually, I feel like so energized.
Good.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, then let's do our closing prayers. So Zara, if you will do our dedication prayers. So now, what we've done is we did our motivation. We did the main body, which was our teaching tonight, our discussion. And now we do our dedication, where whatever merit we have gained, whatever wisdom we have gained, whatever loving kindness, compassion, we are now dedicating to all others for their benefit of attaining enlightenment themselves. We're not holding on to it selfishly. We're giving it to others. So Zara is going to read those prayers for us.
I'm starting on page 18. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then going all the way through 22.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dorji Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dharma Lord Gampopa, Phagmo, Drupa, and Lord Drinkungpa, please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessings of all the Kaya Lamas. By this virtue may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have a long life. I pray that your Dharma activity spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samanta Bhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the 3 Kayas, by the blessing of the truth and the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate root of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Junkagpa Ratnashri, who is omniscient Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, meditation, until the end of samsara. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected and the 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in the samsara and nirvana and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not die confused. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om Ahong. Om Ahong. May my body, speech, and mind be inseparable from my body, speech, and mind until the
of all
the enlightened ones. Okay. I'll say thank you.
Very good. Thank you. That's a prostration. We're doing prostrations when we do that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you. I hope everybody enjoyed that. It was a pleasure to have everybody there. Soho, thank you for coming. And Grant, thank you. Ed,